Hey guys, it's Bitty Penny, and I'm here today with a MINTAY Summertastic video, and I'm gonna make 6 cards. So I'm taking 7 pieces of paper. That front cover, I love it. On the front and back covers, they actually print designs on, so that's really cool. So I'm taking those papers, and I mean, immediately I had an idea of what I wanted to do with these. I wasn't quite sure which background I was going to put them on just yet, but I was going for it. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. So settle in. This is a 20-minute video, and there's a lot of talky, but I hope you enjoy and I hope you get some inspiration. So basically, I'm gonna fussy cut out a lot of these little tiles and designs. I think I did 8 or 9 total, and there's 12 on that one little sheet. So this is a 6x6 paper pad, and it's called Summertastic. So what my plan is for these cutouts is making like a thread that has ephemera pieces on it. So I cut them all out, I'm laying them out. Now, one way to do this is with a sewing machine. You just sew and you keep sewing in between the pieces. So you just sew one straight line, even with the space. But if you don't have a sewing machine, or you don't want to use it with paper, or you don't want to use it today, I'm going to show you another way to do this. So I just took a punch that was small enough, I thought, to fit behind the images. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip each piece over. I'm going to put some glue on it. Now this one, I put the flower behind it, and that was my anchor. But basically, those little flowers that I punched out are going to anchor the thread and the ephemera together and give you something to glue down. So I left this in so you could see what I'm talking about. Now you want to pay attention to orientation. You don't want to glue like that little beach hut. You wouldn't want it to be upside down or something. So, pay attention to orientation as you go. And there you go. There's a little ephemera thread. So now I just have to find which paper I wanted to put it on. And this was just way too busy, but one of my ideas was to wrap it all around the thread. What I did like was this. I didn't know what else I was going to do, but I wanted to glue those on the horizon. So I'm taking this 6x6 sheet of paper, and I'm going to cut it down to 5.5 by 5.5. So I have 6x6 envelopes, so I usually make 5.5 by 5.5 cards. And with those cards, sometimes I like things hanging over the edge, so that ensures me that I always have enough room in my envelope for my card. So what I did here was I selected 3 ephemeras that are kind of in the same size range, and that was kind of my thought process there. So I'm going to pop these up with some foam tape and glue them down on the horizon here. And I just love this. And then I felt like, okay, I should probably anchor this down somehow, even though I like it just like it is. So I bring in a scrap piece of paper, and then I really liked the flowers. I thought that was different, unexpected, but I thought there was some sand. There it is. And so I grabbed that instead. And this totally reminds me of Jamaica, of like the People's Beach, like the locals beach. And I just love this so much. So that is the card front for that one. And then I move on to the next. And this was a piece that I had already cut on. Actually, the one that I'd taken the sand from. This is the other side of it, the one with the window. And so I decided I'm going to cut that down and make that the centerpiece of my next card. And this is just a flow. I had no plans other than to work with this paper pad. And so I just let the ideas come to me as I went. Now I'm cutting down my base, which is going to be 5.5 by 5.5. So I'm putting those on there, and then I wanted some sort of separation. Now I had originally planned on keeping those 4 images together, and then I forgot and I cut them up. Oh, the good thing is with these paper pads you get 4 sheets of the 6 different double-sided designs, so I can go back and create a card like what I wanted to do with those quads before. It's no big deal. All right, so I'm just kind of playing around here because I don't want it just to be those 2 sheets of paper. And I left all this in even though none of it really comes into play with where I went with it eventually. So I'm thinking that's gonna work. And then I think, oh, okay, maybe I'll bring in an embossing folder and I'll put some embossed paper behind it, and that'll be cool. So I bring that in, and then I realize my die cutting machine isn't readily available, but that's something you could do. I decide to crumple it up instead. I'm gonna get essentially the same effect that I would have gotten if I had used that embossing folder for the most part. So, you know, just ball it up to get some texture there. And I really like it. So that sheet of paper wasn't quite big enough to frame that centerpiece the way I wanted it to. So here's a little hack for you. I cut out some to go around the top corner. Okay. And then I didn't want that part hanging off. Okay, so I did that. So then I cut off a similar L shape for the bottom corner. Yay. So now my 4 corners have some of that texture going on. And when I went to refill my ATG gun, I found these little tape dispensers. I'd forgotten that I had gotten them to test them out. And I only used 1, and they come in a 4-pack. So I was like, oh, let me go ahead and use those up. I choose not to use them because they feel so wasteful. There's really not that much on them. And then you're throwing away all this plastic, and you know the deal with our oceans. So I'm just not really down with that. But I am going to use what I have, so I'm just using those up. And then this, I decided to use my glue. And I used that center, that leftover piece to go in the center to keep everything level. So I really like the way this turned out. I ended up not adding those. I just didn't want it to make it too clustered. I think this paper is just so gorgeous. You really don't have to do much. Now I'm running my fingernail along the top edge of that paper to get some of the glue. So the sheets are glued into the paper pad. I'm trying to get some of that off. Those 2 are pretty much done. And now this one, I love this one just as it is. So all I'm gonna do is cut this down to 5.5 by 5.5. Now I chose to take like a 1/4 off each side so that it wouldn't be lopsided. I still wanted it to present in basically the way it was printed, except for my 1/2 inch did come off the top instead of the bottom. Because you can see the terracotta pots and the little ice cream cart are already a little bit cut off. So on this one, I took it to my sewing machine and I just stitched around it. Like, I don't want to just glue a piece of paper to another piece of paper and be like, I'm done. I had to add something to it, or else I wouldn't be playing. So I like to leave my threads nice and long. Again, I'm just playing around here, but I didn't want to add anything to it really. So I move on. Now this one, this makes me think of Naples, Italy, and like the Amalfi Coast area. It's one of me and my husband's favorite places. We have great memories from there. And so I always think of that. This one also made me think of a poem. Bear with me. Summer came and summer went. It was socially distant. Oh, how I long for summer. There you go. A little poem that the card inspired. I look forward to summer every year, hanging out with my kids, swimming all the time, just seeing people, not having the hectic schedule of school and all the pressure that that brings. And this summer has just been so different. Unforgettable for sure. And memorable, just not in the ways that any of us could expect, right? So I took the little beach hut and fussy cut it, and then I am going to do my own frame here with leftover pieces. So out of the 7 sheets of paper that I cut to make these cards, I had so few scraps left over, like less than I've ever had with any paper pad before. I was so impressed. I had one little strip, like what I'm using here to border my paper, and 2 pieces of fussy cut ephemera, and that was about it. And I think one other little square of paper, and that was all. I used every bit of it to make these cards. So that's always rewarding. Okay, so I'm just kind of framing up this image because, of course, it's magical all on its own. I like the way this came out. I did pop up the beach hut to give it some dimension. And then once I have the frame done, I finally have a home for that little moped scooter, which I love scooters like this. My dad was a car man, and he just loved, it was his hobby. And he loved cars, and he always had me driving or on wheels. So I had a little baby blue like moped like this when I was like 12. And I loved that thing. So I have, you know, an affinity for these little mopeds. So it had to find a home in one of these cards. So I just pop it up by the little beach hut. And I like it because it brings that thread in the front, on the front of the card. And I like it because I ended up sewing the insides of the cards, all of them. So I like that that one ended up having a little thread. Okay, so I'm taking this and cutting the 4 panels. And I am going to make a couple of A2 size cards. So the first thing I decided to do was take my scissors and rough up the edges of this. I really like doing this, especially with a nice sturdy paper like this. It just gives it a little something extra. So we did that, and then I'm kind of deciding what I want to do. I decide to bring in 2 of my pre-cut bases, and I'm going to watercolor my background. This is a technique I use very often. And so I brought in my Prima pastels. Well, they're watercolors, but they're Pastel Dreams, I believe is what this palette's called. And I am just going to make some watercolored stripes here for my background. I didn't really want to bring in another sheet of the MINTAY paper for these. I wanted to keep them pretty clean and simple and just use that ephemera as the focal point. And it's clean and simple and lovely. Now on this one, I decided to do some pink and some like mint green stripes. And that was kind of fun, changing it up. So I'd be interested to know which of these cards are your favorites. Or if you use paper pads in some of these ways. Do you make 6x6 cards? I'd just like to have some conversations with you down below about this video, about these card sizes and these paper pads. So leave me some comments. All right, so I tore this one as I was roughing up the edges, but that's no big deal. Sometimes the things like this that happen in crafting and card making in particular are kind of fun because they force you to come up with a resolution that fixes the problem. And a lot of times it stretches me to places I wouldn't go otherwise. So I just wrapped a little thread, or sorry, ribbon around that, and I put thread around this one. And this one I splattered. And here I'm just using Fun Foam as my dimension. I'm almost out of foam tape. I need to get some more. Fun Foam is great. All right, so now it's time to tackle the insides of these cards. And I'm going to bring in the same technique that I did with the A2 card backgrounds. And I'm just kind of looking at the front of each one to decide what color I want to use on the inside. Now this brush, I think this is from IKEA. It's like one of the kids' cheap brushes. But I liked how wide and flat it was, and the bristles are pretty soft. This thing holds a ton of water in it, you guys. Like, it's a very effective watercolor brush, but it's got a lot of water in it. You have to be careful. It warps my paper a little bit, but I'm not worried about it. So I'm just adding these lines down here. And I go ahead and do that for all the cards. Next, I am going to bring in these little 4 1/4 by 4 1/4 squares that I had sewn. I just stitched around the edges, and definitely not perfectly. And when I stitch anything, I like to leave long threads, as you can see here. It's just kind of my thing. So when I make junk journals and do any kind of sewing in the craft room, I usually leave my like bobbin threads really long. It drives some people nuts, I'm just sure of it, but for me, I like it. Okay, so I'm bringing in my ephemera thread that I had made. And that one's done. And another piece. Now this one I was stitching pretty quickly, and I had stitched off the edge, but I wasn't worried about it because I knew I could cover it up with ephemera. So I was looking for that piece in particular so I could just get it over with, like use it and move on. So I'm kind of just turning it and deciding where I want things. I decided I want it there, but more laid out in a slightly different place. There we go. So these really are simple. There's nothing too complicated about the designs I'm sharing with you today. But I hope still that you're able to feel inspired, and maybe if you haven't checked out these paper pads before, they might be something you were interested in. But you could do everything that I'm doing here today with any paper pad that you already have. You don't have to buy these paper pads to make these cards. I know myself in this hobby, I got caught up for years thinking I had to have all the latest things and every cute thing I saw, and I ended up just accumulating a lot of debt that now I have to pay off. So I don't want to be that YouTuber who's always encouraging you to go and buy things. I want to be the type of YouTube channel that encourages you to make things and to use what you have and think about your supplies in new and different ways. Maybe you have some ephemera or some things that you might want to cut out like I did here and make ephemera threads. And maybe you can come up with different ways of using them in your cards. So, of course, if your budget allows, buy the things. I mean, they're they're lovely, right? But if it's not, don't stress. You can still make art, and that is the point. That's what brings me the joy, is the making and creating. So this is my last one here that I'm embellishing the inside. So in my sewing machine, I like my top thread and my bobbin to be different colors. I'm so Punky Brewster. Punky Brewster was out when I was a little girl, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's someone else like me in this world. All right, so here they are. Here are the cards I made today. If you made it this far, congratulations. You did awesome. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you like the results. And I really appreciate you hanging out with me and sharing your time with me and validating that my channel matters or is decent. Oh gosh. And leave me some comments, like and subscribe. I'd love that. And I just hope you have a great day. Thanks so much for watching.